You guys so much for being here so we can learn about the residency process and congratulations on matching. Very big deal. I know every med student's dream is to match, but um, to get right into it, can you guys introduce yourselves?
I'll go ahead first. My name is Arzu. I am graduating from Norda College of Osteopathic Medicine here in Utah, but I'm originally from San Diego, and I matched to psychiatry at CMC in Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm Ahmad. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I go to med school at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, and I'm matching into emergency medicine at Harbor UCLA.
Great job. Congratulations, guys. Okay. My first question is probably the most basic, which is how does the application process work? I know some people may have a vague idea, but if you guys can kind of go through it from the perspective of a student, that would be great.
Yeah, so you fill out the ERAS application around September if you're a fourth year of medical school, and a lot goes into that application. It's talking about your activities throughout medical school, everything from research to extracurriculars to volunteer experiences. You write a personal statement, you collect letters of rec, there's a bunch of demographic information, and then of course you select the programs you're applying to and the specialties you're applying to if you are applying to more than one. You also select your geographical preferences, as well as if your specialty allows for it, you can signal your top programs. So for psychiatry, we were given 10 signals this cycle, which was an increase from 5 last year. And so this time around, we got to signal 10 programs that were our favorite. And that sort of lets those programs know that we are interested in them. And the data has shown that that tends to prove effective for getting you interviews. So definitely using those signals wisely is an important thing. As for the rest of your application, it's really advised that you get started with your application as soon as possible. So you can start collecting letters of rec as early as your third year on your core rotations. And it's actually advised that you ask early because pre-sub attending is spurious, getting those to you quite late and sometimes even ghosting students. So also having some backups will be really, really helpful. But ultimately just putting thought into what specialty you want to apply to and also the programs that you want to apply to.
That's pretty well captured. I don't think there's much else I can add. I'd say that the biggest surprises for me were that you're building your CV for like away rotations and other things, but you're not quite like uploading a CV. So you really have to pick experiences, including that like lumps together research, volunteerism, everything together, which is pretty different. So I think it shows that quality is really important over quantity. I'll also say that I think things are changing. I know emergency medicine next year is not going to do ERAS. They're doing a different type of application that I'm not familiar with. So I don't know what the changes may be, but besides that, I think it's kind of like applying to med school, but the difference is being just having some advanced planning about getting your recs, and then you have to think a little bit about signaling, which is new, and that varies based on programs. And they're sometimes tiered too. So you like have a gold signal and a silver, and we didn't have to deal with that. We only had five. And then I think also the geographical preferences, which I think can be confusing to some people.
Yeah, speaking of geographical preferences, one of the questions is how likely is someone to match within their hometown? And then also for people with families and couples, etc., how does that process work? Is there something specific catered to them?
Yeah, so there is a couples match process that I didn't go through couples match, so I can't really speak on that, but there definitely is a couples match option. Um, as far as geographic preferences, you get 3 out of 9, I believe, across the country. You definitely get I guess you're higher on the priority list of applicants if you have some sort of strong geographical connection with that area. So I definitely got more interviews on the West Coast because I'm from California, some from the mountain region because that's where I went to medical school, and then also a couple on the East Coast because I have my sister there on the East Coast. So even sort of minor connections can really help you in deciding where you want to use those geographical preferences, but also in securing those interviews.
Yeah, in terms of, yeah, so that's couples matching. answered, I think if you're trying to stay, but whether it be at your like home institution or try to go back home, I think that having some connection to a place really does matter. Now, with that said, I think geographical preferences can be valuable and maybe like helping programs decide, oh, who are we going to interview? People who are like likely really tied to this place and really realistically want to come here. So it's helpful, but I think once you get your interviews, it's really kind of like at that point, are you a good fit for the program? And geographical preferences, from what was explained to me, matter a little bit less. But yeah, you have kind of a footprint of like where you grew up, where you went to college, like where you did med school. That kind of tells a little bit of your story of like where you might be willing to go. Having no connections to the West Coast, I knew that it was going to be a really tough market to break into because everybody wants to go to the West Coast, at least from the East Coast. And so I think that I made it intentional to try to do an away rotation out there because I knew my sights might be set on the West Coast, and I just wanted to keep that option open. And then the last thing is like depending on your program, but most of you, like my home program, didn't ask us to signal them or and didn't expect us necessarily rate like prefer our region geographically because they understood that we were interested and they're like, you can do that. And like our weighted the same. They're like, you don't need to geographically preference us. It matters a little bit to us, but not much. And they also said we didn't have to signal them. So it's variable based on where, but there is some level of thought that goes in. My recommendation would be just like rank based on what you're truly interested in and don't worry about like playing um, the game of trying to get as many interviews as you can, which I think is something that crosses everybody's mind.
Nice. That's good advice. Um, Arizu, I know you mentioned to start thinking about getting letters at your third year, but when should someone like realistically start thinking about their application and like, oh, I should do this and I should start working on it too?
Some people might not like this answer, but I think day one of medical school. I'm also a type A like planner, so that's just my strategy. I also knew what I wanted to do when I came into med school. I knew I wanted to apply psychiatry. So for me, it was a matter of really deciding what I want to commit to and spend my time doing during these 4 years of med school that was ultimately going to strengthen my application. Now, obviously, I wouldn't get involved with anything I didn't really personally feel invested or passionate about, but I tried to really align both of those things, my strategy and my genuine interest, to align as well as possible. So that way, at the end of the day, everything really made an impact and was meaningful on my application. But I would say if you're not like me and you want to have a more realistic timeline of getting ready for your application, definitely the summer before you apply. So around May, June, July is when I would start opening the application and looking at sort of what goes into it. Because some people really haven't updated their CVs in a couple of years. Some people haven't written a personal statement or an essay in several years since they applied to medical school. And so I really think just getting ahead of it and starting as early as possible so you can make edits to your statement, to your personal statement, and go through several iterations of it will ultimately help you sort of create the best version of your application.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially if you kind of know early on what you're thinking. I need to be a little bit more type A. I'm a little bit more kind of behind the ball, and I think I came in pretty open to whatever and was exploring broadly. I think I liked sports, and I thought orthopedics might make sense. And then I did my surgery rotation, and I still convinced myself that I wanted to do it. And then I did it, like looked into it more because I really liked EM too. And I did like a career exploration month my third year. And I was like, oh man, I'm way happier doing EM. And so I think it's okay if you're like someone like me who kind of fell on something a little bit later. Um, I didn't really seriously start. I think Otosu made a great point about thinking ahead of time, like what am I interested in, and thinking about your story. Like you are kind of selling yourself again, like as it's a pitch. Like this is who I am as an applicant, kind of like you did for med school. The more you can think about that general idea is great. For me, I kind of just did things I was passionate about, and then when I was applying for ways, I kind of had to build a CV, which is good, but I really just kind of put things in it, and I didn't really think about it. But I think like after you're away, like that summer is a great time to really to like list what 10 um, activities do you really think you want to like include, and it's a good time to look back on your CV and your CV. When I look back on mine, it kind of told my story for me. I was like, oh, okay, clearly I like really like mentorship and community service. Like this is just something I do like a decent amount of. And I was like, okay, cool. I like service. I like social emergency medicine. And then that kind of helped me guide what my application would be. And then I thought about what made, it's just like a little bit of reflection, like why am I interested in those things? And I thought about my background. It made a lot of sense. Um, and it was great because it also helps guide you and you know the type of applicant you are, the type of programs and what they sell. Some programs were more focused on social emergency medicine, some were like more focused on research. And um, I think it's like kind of it can be like an organic thing that you just kind of look back on and you kind of arrive at like, oh, this is what my story tells. And you can kind of just do what you're interested in and allow it. But if you can put the forethought in, I think that's great too. And something I definitely kick myself about not doing a little bit more of earlier on.
And how did you guys personally work through the application? Did your school provide resources? Did you figure it out on your own, or did you have a mentor?
I had, through my school, we had the option to sort of have someone review our personal statement. And then this feels like ages ago, even though it was, it's just 6 months ago, but had, I think, some friends or mentors maybe review my personal statement and application as well. Um, and so that was really helpful having a couple sets of eyes on my personal statement. And I keep mentioning the personal statement because I do feel like it's one of the most important pieces of the application, at least the piece that you can really have full control over versus your transcripts, your exam scores, even your activities to a certain extent are kind of already defined for you. And there's not really much wiggle room. So the personal statement is why I'm focusing on that. But yeah, I definitely had several eyes look at it. Although I wouldn't have like, let's say 10 people look at it. I think that's way too many opinions and can sometimes lead you astray or confuse you if there's too many conflicting voices or opinions on what you're writing. So I think just really having an idea ahead of time which mentors, which faculty, which attendings you really enjoyed working with, and maybe who would be willing to provide that sort of feedback for you. You definitely need feedback though. And so I remember starting my essay maybe in July and writing at least 3 or 4 different versions of it before I felt very comfortable and happy with the final version. And so, yeah, I definitely utilized my school's resources for that and then just my own network.
Nice.
Yeah, the personal statement, it's tough. I kept like getting disgusted by mine the more I read it, and it was really hard. And it's okay to feel like you landed on something that's worse than what you originally put out just because you read it too much. I everything that I echo everything you said. That was like exactly like too many cooks in the kitchen could be a bad thing. All that. I think for me, I had like a lot of help from my school. Like Vanderbilt was just really, we're like really lucky. They were kind of like told us what to expect, what the timeline would be like, just kind of gave us like some guidance. And our dean was like really great about, I think, sitting down with us and like I didn't know who my letter writers would be. And this kind of ties in my old advice, like maybe to start thinking about that a little bit earlier. Like eventually you're gonna need like letters. So, hey, do I need to schedule a rotation on this service because I think that will be important. I could get my letter from like an ICU or something. Um, I had an idea of who I wanted to be my letter writers, but I just two of them I wasn't like I love these people. Like I don't think they knew me as well. And I talked to my dean, and she kind of gave me ideas for people that I didn't even think about. People like in small groups that had worked with me my first year, second year, and she was like, they know you really well and have a lot of feedback. And so, um, some help from the like administration. I think most of my help was from mentors, whether it be like and at different stages in their like process. So I had some resident friends who were like doing EM, and I asked them, what should I expect? What does it look like? Just constantly texting them throughout the cycle. And then I think there are some like Dr. Rashid was like one of the people who is like in comma, like helped me out. We would get on the phone, probably like major milestone. Like I had to talk to him about like options. I try to do as little like Googling as possible because I don't know much. And I think like the people who've done it before us know well. So I think just being resourceful would be helpful.
Mhm. Sorry, do you have something to add? Okay. I actually have a follow-up question about the letters because I'm like obviously applying to medical school soon. And getting the letters are like such a stressful process, especially because I went to such a big like undergrad institution. Is it as stressful in med school too? Because I would assume that the class is smaller, but everyone needs a letter as well. So what's your take?
Yeah, I can answer. I feel like The letters I got for my residency application, they were from preceptors, attendings that I had worked one-on-one with on different rotations. And so I actually did get a chance to get to know them pretty well and vice versa. And so I felt like it was easier getting letters for residency because of that personal sort of connection and relationship we had built versus, yeah, when you're asking your undergrad professors to write you a letter, I mean, I only really connected with maybe one or two of my professors when I was an undergrad. And, I had applied 2 years later after graduating, or yeah, 2 years later. So it was something that maybe they didn't remember me. Maybe I didn't, we didn't really, our interactions didn't stand out. And so there was a lot of that going through my head when asking for letters. And in undergrad, you're not really thinking ahead as much either. And so you're not asking for these letters up front. You're asking for them again, like years after you've graduated when you're finally applying. And so I would just, it is a stressful process what you're going through right now, but just remembering that everyone's sort of going through that same process, that it is very difficult to establish those close relationships while you're an undergrad, and that it does get to be a little bit more natural and easier in when you apply for residency.
Nice. I know that I was stressed out, but thankfully it worked out. But it's nice to know that I won't really have to go through the same level of stress later. But another question I had was about the financial process. I mean, payments and stuff like that. Were you guys surprised at the cost, or were you like mentally prepared for it?
I mean, not surprised because everything's expensive when you're in medical school, but it is a little frustrating, I will say, because at least in my situation, I feel like so psychiatry is getting a bit more competitive year by year, and so I really wanted to feel confident that I was going to match, and so I applied rather broadly, and so that means more money for more applications. And so looking back, I probably actually didn't need to apply to that many programs, but in the moment, I really wanted to feel secure and certain I would match. And so that was, yeah, very expensive. And on top of that, something that Ahmad's been referring to are the away rotations we do, or audition rotations, as some people refer to them. Those actually are quite expensive because you're applying to those and you have to pay to apply to those rotations. And then you're traveling to these rotations if you're doing them at, in outside of your home state, and you're paying for all those accommodations. I think some programs do give scholarships for visiting medical students, but not all of them, and certainly not the majority of them. And so those costs actually add up. So when you really tally in all the costs of applying a residency, including the application costs, but also the rotations you may have had to do to get there, you're talking several thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. Like thousands, and that you kind of get used to it as a med student. Like step exams are so expensive, and you're like, these people are just milking me for every penny I have, and it's pretty frustrating. You just got to be resourceful as much as you can. I think I was only doing away rotations that lined up with our schedule, so I didn't have to take like multiple months off, and then also that offered some type of scholarship, and that I or maybe I knew somebody. So I like knew somebody in LA when I was there, and they offered like for me to stay with them for a month, which was really helpful. And then I applied for the scholarship, which helped me like offset the costs with like flights and stuff, um, which was really lucky of me. So if you're Kurdish, you are probably eligible for some of these underrepresented scholarships, and you should definitely look into that. And then the ERAS, I think I had like a discounted number of programs that like I could like pay a little less for. And I did those programs up until like the number. And then I was like, I'm not paying full price for any of these other apps because I was like, not gonna, I just didn't like giving my money to them. Um, and I think that was helpful, but it was still pretty expensive. And then I didn't do really like many second looks. And if you do want to, that's great again, if it's in a city that you know somebody. But between second looks and your way and the application costs, like it is and thousands. And, it can be tough. So make sure you just budget for that.
What do you guys think was your greatest strengths throughout the whole process?
I will say when it came to interviews, I felt very confident. All of mine were virtual. They were through Zoom or some other web-based platform. And so I felt rather confident, communicating virtually because I've been doing it for years now with my podcasts. And so I think that surprised me a little bit, just how comfortable I felt in front of the camera and sort of knew my way around. I didn't have an issue with eye contact. I didn't have an issue with sort of expressing myself. And so that felt like a big strength for me, just because I've had the experience. Um, I think that would be the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I'd say pretty similar. I think it's kind of funny, and this is like maybe good news, but it sucks if you really did put in the work. Like I think a lot of from my experience and from what I've seen of my friends, a lot of the interview trail and your ways is just like being normal and like being friendly and being like just sweet and kind to people and just like chill. And my interviews were so not serious. And this is maybe just an EM thing, but most like 90% of them, the interview started like, what are you doing fourth year? What travel plans do you have set up? It was just kind of, which throws you off because you prepare for like them to ask you what your life story is. And I think just being able to communicate and just like chat with them and have a good, pleasant conversation is good. Um, so I think that was something I felt comfortable and confident as well. I think that was my strength. But also I think part of it is just like being prepared just in case, because you're still going to get some off-ball questions, even if it's just like about like what's going on. And so like somebody asked me about like what I think about emergency medicine, like where the field is going, and just like being a little bit prepared to answer questions like that does go a long way because most of your interviews might be chill, but you might get that one, and just like being ready for it shows that you put in effort, you looked into the program and did like a little bit of homework on them. You don't have to study on them, just like 30 minutes of looking at their website and get an idea.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, and I will say, just to kind of what you were saying there at the end, towards the end of my interview cycle, I was just so, I don't want to say burnt out, but I was just like, whatever, like I feel like I did well enough. I'm gonna match somewhere and still put my best foot forward and tried to be as, kind and personable as possible. But definitely the 30 minutes I was putting into researching on the website ended up turning into like maybe a 5-minute glance right before the interview started. But definitely, I think preparation is something I didn't touch on before, but something worth mentioning. Yeah, you definitely want to be prepared to an extent. But then again, most of the interviews you'll have are quite casual and just getting to know you on a person-to-person level. So you don't have to overthink it.
Awesome.
I will say, one thing that like our program director told us a lot about, and I like really, really value this advice, and it's like meaning more and more to me the more I've like reflected on it. But going into ways is like just like have administrative hygiene. Like if somebody emails you and they're just like not even like an attending, but just like the coordinator of the EM program or like the residency program there, and like they're coordinating students, respond within like 24 hours. Like be kind, say thank you. Like don't create problems for them. Don't like wait until the deadline to like respond to anything. When you see people in the ED, say hi to nurses, ancillary staff. Like just be kind and be excited to be there. And I did that. And I think that was like kind of tying into like one of the strengths. But I like, if you know me, I'm not like the smartest kid in any given room ever. And none of my feedback on my away rotation was about my app like ability or what I knew. It was just like he was nice to people. And it like went a long way. And so I think that really does matter. And I think if you can just do that and get into practice of that, you're gonna impress a lot of people throughout med school who are going to be really excited to write you letters, but also on your ways and on the interview trail.
Thank you. That was really good advice. Did you guys face any challenges?
I'm trying to think.
It's good if you didn't.
No, nothing glaring comes to mind, but I will say there were those odd interviewers or odd questions you would get that you kind of throw you off guard. And I'm a little bit of an overthinker. So in the aftermath of the interview, I might go back and reflect on some of my responses to some of those more unsettling or just the questions that caught me off guard, rather, or the comments that some interviewers might have made. And I would just say to really just let it go and be okay with whatever you put out there. Again, it's an interview and you're not expected to be prepared for every single question that can come your way. And so I would just really advise people to take a moment of pause and reflect on what they want to say before answering, um, and just kind of go with what speaks to them. I mean, just be yourself during these interviews, right? And I think that was the biggest challenge for me was just being okay when these questions came up that maybe caught me off guard. And now that after match and everything, looking back on it, it's really not that serious. I mean, one question that might have stood out to me because it's the one question that is lingering and bothering me, is not going to stand out to amongst all the other questions they asked.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm sorry, just copying her answers, but I we're probably like-minded in this. I think it for me it was just like the mental game of it all. Because I was lucky enough to I feel like I did well on my away rotation. I mean, I like talked to my mentors and I felt like I was gonna have a strong app, but it doesn't matter. Like you're gonna just doubt yourself the whole time. I didn't believe anybody when they're like, "Oh, things are gonna be fine." Like, just like be ready, be prepared. I was just I mean, I wasn't like off the walls, like looking at Excel spreadsheets or anything, but I just like doubted, like whether I was like gonna match and, like match it like my like stuff, because you just have that doubt. Like you're always thinking, and I think part of this is because like I'm a child of like immigrants, right? Like there's no safety net. Like, it's gotta work. Like there's no going back or like, oh, I'll just pivot, so if I feel like I've always had that mindset and I always will be like, oh, maybe I could have handled that conversation like better or whatever. And it's like, no, it's like not a big deal. You probably like I feel like in retrospect, I was probably doing fine on my interview trail, was like answering questions better than most. And you're just trying to constantly like compare yourself to this ideal version of you, and it's just not gonna happen. Even like well with my personal statement, I just hated it at the end. I was like, I'm tired of reading this. It means nothing to me anymore. And it's being dramatic, and everybody's like, dude, you just like have to land the plane. Like it doesn't have to be the most exceptional personal statement of all time. It just like has to be like good and no red flags. That's really it. I think just kind of being able to surround yourself with people who are like going to be reassuring.
Tying back into the challenges, if you were to look back, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I've already touched on it, but just reminding myself to relax a little bit. I was on those spreadsheets every once in a while. I wasn't, tracking them daily or anything like that, but I was, scoping it out, seeing what other people were saying every once in a while. And then when I noticed that actually made my anxiety a lot worse, I definitely like shut it down, took a step back and just focused on what I was doing. Because, you have to realize you're interviewing, also doing rotations, you're also living your life all at the same time. And so it can be hard to sort of split yourself into these different responsibilities that you have. So interviewing can be quite taxing because you're talking about anywhere from like 3 to 7 hours for one interview. Um, and if you're like me and a little bit more introverted, then it's socially very draining to sit, even if it's talking to a computer screen, can be very draining to do that. So a reminder to take better care of myself, I think, would have been really helpful. But I did my best. And another thing is getting really probably stopping myself from getting so attached to the outcome. I think I have this similar mindset as Ahmad, like we are children of immigrants. We have this do or die sort of mentality. And for better or worse, we work really hard to get where we are, but it can be our Achilles heel because we sometimes feel paralyzed or overwhelmed by the amount of the weight on our shoulders, maybe. And I would just say not getting so attached to the outcome will be helpful because I feel like I had a top program that I was really attached to, and I still matched to one of my top programs, and I'm really happy to go. But when it wasn't my number one program, I'll just be honest, it was a little bit a moment that felt like defeat, when in reality, this was my victory lap. I matched into an amazing program. And so, I'm entitled to feel how I want to feel about that. And I let myself feel those things that day. But I will just say, be very open-minded during the interview and match process. You're going to end up where you're supposed to go. And I believe that you're going to do well wherever you go. So,
Yeah, I think everybody just kind of puts like immense pressure on themselves. And um, I think for me, I think the biggest thing that I'm glad I did a little bit of this, and you could always criticize doing it more. It's just recognizing the opportunity as a fourth year. Interviewing's tough, it's time consuming, and it's busy, but and it's easy to just be drained and like chill and just want to do nothing, and that's totally fine. But we are going to start residency soon. And so just making sure you're taking that time in between interviews on like days where you're not interviewing or reading up on somebody, just like go hang out with your friends somewhere, go touch grass, like have a good life, like live a little bit because it's going to be pretty tough. And I think you really need to take care of yourself. And hopefully, if you're at the point where you feel like you have a decent chance of matching, don't be afraid to spend on yourself a little bit. I'm not saying go take out like a crazy loan or anything like that, but um, don't like say no to going to get food with friends because you've been like living like your time is going to be valuable in residency. Your time is going to be valuable long term. And I think that's just don't be afraid to like take another trip or something with family. Um, that's my advice.
Self-care is important. Um, what is your recommendation for first year medical students? Like, what steps should they take so they can kind of increase their chances to get into residency?
I would say one of the biggest hindrances to matching is going to be your boards exams. And so if you're a first year medical student and you haven't taken your level one, step one exams yet, and then your step two, level two, setting yourself up so you have good study habits, you have good self-care habits, so that when step one, level one comes around, you know, do what you need to do and pass your exams, because that's ultimately going to be the very first thing I think they look at. It's something that some programs use to screen out applicants. And so I'll say that would be my very first thing because it's hard to bounce back. I won't say very hard, but a little harder to bounce back from poor academics, versus maybe getting in some other things on your application towards the end. I think if you just want a really strong foundation to focus on your your exam, preparing for exams kind of early on.
Yeah, lock in and like pass your classes. I think you got to like learn the information, and that's kind of so just like, absorb as much of that fire hose of information as you can and focus on passing your classes. I do think you got to like, it's like med school. You got to check the boxes, like GPA and MCAT, step one, step two, and like making sure you got P in your classes. Like that's important. Um, just, and it's okay if you like my third year, we had like an tiered system, like honors, high pass, whatever. Like sometimes like there's just the luck of the draw. I remember I got like a clerkship or like a coordinator for a class that was just like on a tear, like just like decided to set new expectations for the class. They're like, I felt like I was a little bit of a sacrificial lamb, and like you're not always going to get the highest grades, and like like that's okay, but just step one, step two, and like passing your class and learning as much as you can and getting ready for clinical rotation. That I think is like great. People always ask about research, and my like quick answer to that is like you don't have to necessarily do it right away. It's a little different if you're doing surgery. Like you might start thinking about that like after your first year, etc. But focus on your classes first, and then like learn your study habits. I think that is a great point. And it's going to evolve. Like you don't have to do Anki day one. Like you can figure out what works for you and then figure it out from there.
Thank you guys. Last question. Are there any resources that you would like to share that helped you?
Yeah, I used when I was learning about different programs, I used the Residency Explorer page. It kind of gives a brief snapshot of just like what different residency programs have to offer. But then also when you're sort of narrowing down your list, I would advise you to go maybe website by website to sort of go look at the programs individually, take a closer look what they have to offer because you want to be applying to programs that offer what you're interested in. And so yeah, I think that's important. Another resource, I think those are the main. I think I may have used Texas Star once or twice, but that one's not quite as helpful. It wasn't for me at least. Um, I think those are my main resources. And then obviously like mentors, the people around me, um, other psychiatrists and faculty members and administrators at my school, just whoever I could really have a conversation with and get different perspectives from.
Yeah, I would say I think my like in terms of resources, I don't think any websites. I didn't look at really too many websites besides the program specifically that I might have been interested in. But I would really reach out to like administration or mentors, like your program director at your institution or whoever that may, APD or somebody who's like been a part of the process. They have a good relationship with, like even attendings in your specialty. You'd be surprised how many people can just offer their thoughts about what they think are strong programs and like can kind of link you up with programs that you like you can tell them your interest and they'll be like, oh, this might be a good fit. And then a lot of times they might just know people and be like, oh, like, I know somebody who's a resident there or who's like an attending there and connect you and you can get to talk to them a little bit more directly. And those things are helpful. Um, so I think using your resources around you is valuable. Don't just like do this on your own. Don't be afraid to ask around.
And I'll add one other thing because last year around this time, I went to the APA conference in New York City, which is the American Psychiatric Association. They do an annual conference and they also have a residency fair on one of the days of the conference. And so that was a really helpful resource. I met a couple of program directors that later on interviewed me during the interview cycle. And so I think when you're able to get FaceTime with people like that or get to even know their residents. I met a few residents while I was there. Yeah, any opportunity you have like that to really expand your network is going to be really helpful.
Oh, last little plug, sorry. If you don't have like if you have free counseling at your institution, take advantage of it. Like just somebody you can just kind of bounce your thoughts off of. You're like, and it's going to be a high stress, high anxiety time in your life. Hopefully, you like haven't established some like relationship with like a therapist or a counselor, and that's always great. I love mine. Like she's always really good at bouncing, and like helping me reflect through things, and definitely like nice to not put that burden on my friends and be able to, well, to some degree, but like to be able to rely on somebody else who's a professional is always great too.
Thank you. Do you guys have any last words before we wrap it up? Okay, no. Okay. Thank you guys for being here. Congratulations on matching. You guys will be
Sorry,
wonderful
I
doctors.
I didn't mean to say it like no, I was just nodding my head. Yeah, do you want to share some thoughts? I'm happy to kind of give my like own little my spiel is you're like applying, you've got through med school, you've done this before. Believe in yourself. You're not going to fully be able to believe in yourself, but rely on the people around you. Don't be afraid to ask people for support, to like use their eyes to like go through your application and you're just got to trust yourself and trust the process a little bit. I know I sound like a basketball coach, but I really mean that.
Okay.
I have the same cliche advice. I was going to say trust the process and trust yourself, and also really enjoy the process. I enjoyed the vast majority of my interviews and conversations and learned so much about them, but also more importantly about myself in the process. I gained so much confidence, like learned new things about myself, pushed myself in a lot of different ways, and I feel not prepared going to residency. I don't think anyone feels prepared going in, especially now that I'm not really doing much since I'm done with rotations. I feel like I've forgotten 95% of what I learned, but just sort of prepared me emotionally, taking this time to really enjoy myself, enjoy my accomplishments, and even what we were saying earlier, to really just enjoy your fourth year because if you're like me and you were traveling from away rotation to away rotation and balancing interviews and other things, it can be stressful, but I sort of tried to make sure wherever I was, I explored where I was, got to know people, took care of myself, did what was important to me, and maintained some semblance of a routine as much as I could. Um, yeah, just enjoy the process.
Thank you. Yay. Congrats, guys. Okay, I'll